Clara Gray was known for two things in the dusty town of Redemption: her skill with metal and her stubborn independence. Her small blacksmith shop, tucked away on the edge of town, was filled with the clang of hammer against steel, the scent of coal smoke, and the sparks of her fiery spirit. Children would peek in, wide-eyed, watching her shape horseshoes, mend wagon wheels, and even craft delicate jewelry. She lived alone in a small cottage next to the forge, her days filled with hard work and quiet evenings spent reading by the light of a kerosene lamp. Some folks whispered about her, about how she'd come to Redemption alone, a woman with no family and a determination that scared some men. But most respected her for her skill and her willingness to help anyone in need. If a farmer's plow broke down, Clara was there. If a child needed a toy mended, Clara was there. She was a part of Redemption, even if she wasn't quite of it. The town of Redemption, nestled in a valley surrounded by towering red rocks, was a place of hard work and harder judgments. The people were mostly good, but they clung to old ways, and the preacher, a stern man with a booming voice, held considerable sway over their lives. He spoke often of sin and repentance, his words painting vivid pictures of fire and brimstone. Clara, with her independent spirit, sometimes found herself at odds with his pronouncements, though she mostly kept her opinions to herself. She had a quiet strength, Clara did, a way of meeting your eye that didn't back down, a way of holding her head high even when whispers followed her down the street. It was a strength forged in the fires of her own making, a resilience that had seen her through hardships she never spoke about. She was a woman who knew how to survive, how to build a life for herself, and how to face the world on her own terms. But beneath that strong exterior was a heart that longed for connection, for understanding, for a love that didn't demand she be anything other than herself. She dreamed of a life filled with laughter and warmth, a life where she wasn't always fighting to prove her worth. These dreams she kept locked away, like precious jewels hidden in a strongbox, brought out only in the quiet solitude of her own thoughts. She was a puzzle to the townsfolk, a woman who defied easy categorization. Strong, yet vulnerable. Independent, yet yearning for connection. And soon, that puzzle would become even more complex, her life about to take a turn that would test her strength and challenge the very foundations of Redemption itself. The change came swiftly, like a dust devil swirling across the plains. It started with whispers, barely audible at first, then louder, more insistent. Whispers about Clara's condition, whispers that grew into accusations and judgments. The preacher, his face grim and his voice booming, took to the pulpit to denounce sin and immorality. His words pointed directly at Clara, though he never mentioned her name. Clara tried to ignore it, to focus on her work, to lose herself in the familiar rhythm of hammer and anvil. But the whispers followed her everywhere, clinging to her like burrs. Children who once gazed at her with admiration now pointed and giggled. Women who once sought her advice now turned their backs. Even the men who had once relied on her skills seemed to avoid her gaze. Then came the day the preacher, fueled by the town's growing outrage, demanded a public reckoning. He declared that Clara's sin could not be ignored, that it threatened the very moral fabric of Redemption. He called for a public repentance, a shaming that would serve as a warning to others. The town square, usually bustling with activity, was hushed and still. People gathered, their faces a mixture of curiosity, judgment, and discomfort. A makeshift platform had been erected, and Clara was led onto it, her hands bound tightly behind her back. The preacher began to speak, his voice echoing across the square. He spoke of sin and redemption, of the importance of following God's law. He painted Clara as a fallen woman, a disgrace to the community. His words were like stones, each one hitting Clara with the force of a physical blow. Clara stood tall, her head held high, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She refused to let them see her break. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. Inside, however, her heart was aching. The humiliation was a bitter pill to swallow, the betrayal of her community a wound that cut deep. The punishment was swift and brutal. The lashes stung, each one a searing brand on her skin. But Clara refused to cry out. She bit her lip, focusing on the distant mountains, drawing strength from their silent majesty. With each lash, she felt a part of her old life slipping away. The life she had built, the respect she had earned, the dream she had cherished. But with each lash, she also felt a new strength rising within her. A strength born of defiance, a determination to survive, to rebuild, to prove them all wrong. Even as the pain consumed her, she refused to let her spirit be broken. She would not let their judgment define her. She was Clara Gray, the blacksmith of redemption, and she would not be silenced. She would not be shamed. She would endure. The last lash fell, and Clara swayed, her vision blurring. The crowd remained silent, their faces unreadable. The preacher, his face flushed with self-righteousness, stepped forward to pronounce the judgment complete. But then, a figure moved through the crowd, a figure as unexpected as a lightning strike on a clear day. He was a cowboy, tall and lean, with eyes as deep and blue as the summer sky. He wore a weathered hat that shadowed his face, and his movements were fluid and graceful, like a mountain cat. No one had seen him arrive. No one knew where he came from. He was simply there, a silent presence in the midst of the chaos. Without a word, he approached the platform. The preacher, startled, tried to stop him, but the cowboy simply brushed past him, his gaze unwavering. He reached Clara, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding that bypassed the need for words. He pulled out a knife, its blade gleaming in the afternoon sun, and with a swift, sure motion, he cut the ropes that bound Clara's wrists. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that hung in the air. The cowboy then gently lifted Clara into his arms. She was light as a feather, but her spirit was strong. He carried her through the silent crowd, his gaze daring anyone to interfere. No one moved. They simply watched as he walked away, carrying Clara toward the edge of town. He took her to a small, abandoned cabin nestled in the foothills, a place hidden from prying eyes. Inside, he gently laid her on a makeshift bed of blankets. He cleaned her wounds with cool water and bandaged them with soft cloth. He did it all in silence, his touch gentle and respectful. He brought her food and water, tending to her needs with a quiet efficiency. He never spoke, never asked questions. He simply cared for her, his presence a soothing balm to her wounded body and spirit. Clara watched him, her eyes filled with gratitude and curiosity. She didn't know who he was or why he had come to her rescue, but she knew, deep down, that he was a man who understood her pain, a man who saw her strength. In the days that followed, the cowboy remained by her side, a silent guardian. He hunted for food, chopped wood, and kept the fire burning. He was a constant presence, a reassuring anchor in a sea of uncertainty. And slowly, Clara began to heal, not just physically, but emotionally as well. The cowboy's quiet presence was a powerful medicine, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is still hope, still kindness, still the possibility of redemption. Days turned into weeks in the quiet solitude of the cabin. The silence, once heavy with unspoken pain, began to feel different, softer, filled with a sense of peace Clara hadn't known was possible. The cowboy, whom she still knew only as a silent guardian, continued his routine of quiet care. He would leave before sunrise to hunt, returning with rabbits or deer. He would mend the roof, chop wood, and keep the fire burning, all without uttering a single word. Clara spent her days watching him, observing the way he moved, the way he handled his rifle, the way he looked out at the horizon with a thoughtful expression on his face. She saw a quiet strength in him, a deep understanding of the land and its ways. She began to feel a connection to him, a bond that transcended words. Her physical wounds healed slowly, leaving behind scars that would forever remind her of the ordeal she had endured. But it was the emotional wounds that took the longest to mend. The shame, the betrayal, the feeling of being ostracized by her community. These were wounds that ran deep. But with each passing day, Clara felt her strength returning. She started by helping the cowboy with small tasks, fetching water, gathering firewood. Then, she began to mend her own clothes, using her skills with needle and thread to repair the damage that had been done. One day, she ventured outside the cabin, taking her first tentative steps back into the world. She walked through the woods, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the sun on her face. She felt a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in a long time. She realized that redemption, the town that had rejected her, no longer held the same power over her. She had survived, she had endured, and she had found a strength within herself that she never knew existed. The cowboy watched her from the doorway of the cabin, his eyes filled with a quiet pride. He didn't need to say anything. Clara knew that he understood. As the weeks passed, Clara began to talk, hesitant at first, then more freely. She told the cowboy about her life, about her dreams, about the hardships she had faced. She spoke of her love for blacksmithing, of her desire to create beautiful and useful things. The cowboy listened patiently, his gaze never wavering. He didn't offer advice or judgment. He simply listened, his presence a silent affirmation of her worth. And in his silence, Clara found the courage to reclaim her life, to rebuild her future, and to forge her own path, regardless of what others might think. The healing process was slow, but Clara was determined. She would not let the events of the past define her. She was Clara Gray, and she was a survivor. The day came when Clara knew she had to return to redemption. The cabin had been a sanctuary, a place of healing and refuge, but it wasn't her home. Her home was the forge, the clang of metal, the smell of coal smoke. It was where she belonged, where she felt most alive. She told the cowboy of her decision, her voice filled with a mixture of apprehension and determination. He simply nodded, his eyes conveying his understanding and support. He knew that she couldn't hide forever, that she had to face her past in order to build her future. Together, they rode into town, the cowboy a silent sentinel at her side. The townspeople stared as they passed, their faces a mixture of shock, curiosity, and disapproval. Clara ignored them, her gaze fixed on her destination, the blacksmith shop. The shop was just as she had left it, the tools neatly arranged, the anvil gleaming in the sunlight. But it felt different now, charged with a new energy, a new sense of purpose. Clara stepped inside, taking a deep breath of the familiar air. It was good to be home. She began to work, her hands moving with practiced ease. The hammer rang against the steel, the sparks flew, and a familiar rhythm filled the air. It was a defiant act, a declaration that she would not be silenced, that she would not be driven out. Slowly, cautiously, people began to approach the shop. A farmer needing a plow repaired, a child wanting a broken toy mended. They came hesitantly at first, avoiding her gaze, but Clara treated them with the same kindness and respect she always had. The cowboy remained in town, a quiet presence that seemed to both protect and challenge the townspeople. He would sit on the porch of the general store, watching the comings and goings, his eyes missing nothing. The preacher, however, was not pleased. He saw Clara's return as a challenge to his authority, a sign that his judgment had been defied. He preached against her from the pulpit, warning the townspeople against associating with her. But Clara refused to be intimidated. She continued to work, to help those in need, to live her life on her own terms. She knew that she couldn't change everyone's minds, but she could show them that she was not ashamed, that she was not broken. And slowly, gradually, the town began to change. People began to see Clara not as a fallen woman, but as a strong, resilient survivor. They began to respect her courage, her determination, her unwavering spirit. Clara Gray was back, and she was stronger than ever. She had faced the darkness and emerged into the light, a beacon of hope and resilience for the town of Redemption. The cowboy's presence in Redemption became a constant. He was always there, a silent observer, a watchful protector. He never interfered, never spoke unless directly addressed, but his very presence seemed to hold the town in check. He would help Clara at the forge, lifting heavy loads, tending the fire, his movements efficient and strong. He learned the names of the tools, the different types of metal, the techniques Clara used. He became her apprentice, her partner, her silent confidant. The children of redemption, who had once shied away from Clara, began to approach her again. They were drawn to her warmth, her kindness, her willingness to share her knowledge. They would gather around the forge, watching her work, asking questions, marveling at the sparks that flew from the anvil. The cowboy would often carve small wooden toys for the children, simple figures of animals or cowboys, his hands surprisingly deft. He would hand them out with a shy smile, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The preacher, however, remained unmoved. He saw the growing acceptance of Clara as a sign of the town's moral decay. He preached fire and brimstone sermons, warning the townspeople against the dangers of sin and the consequences of defying God's law. He even confronted Clara directly, his face contorted with anger and self-righteousness. He accused her of corrupting the town, of leading the children astray, of defying God's will. Clara stood her ground, her eyes meeting his without flinching. She told him that she was not ashamed of who she was, that she had done nothing wrong, that she was simply trying to live her life with honesty and integrity. The cowboy stepped forward, placing himself between Clara and the preacher. He didn't say a word, but his presence was enough to silence the preacher and send him storming away. As Clara's pregnancy progressed, the cowboy took on more and more of the work at the forge. He learned to shape horseshoes, to mend wagon wheels, to create the simple tools that the townspeople needed. He was a quick learner, his hands strong and capable. He had a natural talent for blacksmithing, a feel for the metal that surprised even Clara. He also took care of Clara, ensuring that she was comfortable, that she had enough to eat, that she got plenty of rest. He was a gentle and attentive caregiver, his silent presence a constant source of comfort and support. The townspeople watched in amazement as the cowboy took on the role of protector and provider. They had never seen anything like it before, a man who was so strong and capable, yet so gentle and kind. Slowly, they began to understand that the cowboy was not just a mysterious stranger, but a man of deep compassion and unwavering loyalty. He was a man who had seen Clara's strength and had chosen to stand by her side, no matter what. He was a man who understood the power of silence, the power of unspoken love, the power of unwavering support. As Clara's time grew near, the town, despite the preacher's continued disapproval, began to soften. Women, some who had once scorned her, now offered help. They brought food, knitted blankets, and shared stories of their own experiences with childbirth. Even some of the men, their faces sheepish, offered to help with repairs around the cottage and the forge. The cowboy, ever watchful, made preparations for the birth. He cleaned and organized the cottage, ensuring that everything was ready. He gathered herbs for teas to soothe Clara and ease the pain. He consulted with the older women in town, learning what he could about midwifery. He built a sturdy cradle from scraps of wood, sanding it smooth and painting it a soft blue. It was a simple cradle, but it was made with love and care. He carved a small wooden horse to hang above it, its legs frozen mid-gallop. Clara watched him, her heart filled with gratitude and affection. She knew that she was lucky to have him by her side. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He was her protector, her partner, her friend. The preacher, seeing the town's growing acceptance of Clara, grew increasingly desperate. He preached louder, his sermons more fiery, his warnings more dire. He even threatened to excommunicate anyone who supported Clara. But the townspeople were no longer listening. They had seen Clara's strength, her resilience, her unwavering spirit. They had seen the cowboy's compassion, his loyalty, his quiet strength. They had made up their own minds. One evening, as a storm raged outside, Clara went into labor. The cowboy, calm and collected, sent for the midwife and prepared for the long night ahead. The storm mirrored the turmoil inside Clara, the pain of childbirth mixed with the fear of the unknown. But she knew that she was not alone. The cowboy was there, his presence a source of strength and comfort. The midwife arrived, a weathered woman with kind eyes and gentle hands. She took charge, guiding Clara through the contractions, offering words of encouragement and support. The cowboy remained by Clara's side, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering words of comfort. He had never witnessed a birth before, but he was not afraid. He was simply there, present, supportive, and unwavering. As the night wore on, the storm intensified. The wind howled, the rain lashed against the windows, and the thunder shook the cottage. But inside, a new life was about to begin. And in the midst of the storm, Clara gave birth to a healthy baby boy, a tiny miracle born into a world that had once seemed so cruel. The midwife wrapped the baby in a soft blanket and placed him in Clara's arms. Clara gazed at her son, her eyes filled with tears of joy. He was perfect, a symbol of hope and new beginnings. She looked at the cowboy, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. He smiled, his eyes shining with happiness. The storm outside began to subside, as if acknowledging the miracle that had just occurred. The first rays of dawn peeked through the clouds, casting a golden glow upon the cottage. A new day had begun, a new chapter in Clara's life, a new beginning for the town of Redemption. Clara named her son Wind. She chose the name because he was born during a storm, and because she wanted him to be free, strong, and untamed, like the wind that swept across the plains. The cowboy beamed when he heard the name. It suited the child, he thought, this little boy who had come into the world with such a force of nature. Life changed for Clara. Motherhood brought new challenges, new joys, and a new sense of purpose. She learned to balance her work at the forge with caring for Wind, her days filled with the clang of hammer and the cooing of her son. The cowboy continued to be her steadfast support. He helped with Wind, changing diapers, rocking him to sleep, and taking him for walks in the woods. He was a natural father, his quiet strength and gentle touch a comfort to both Clara and Wind. The townspeople embraced Wind, seeing him as a symbol of hope and renewal. The children would gather around the cottage, eager to hold him, to play with him, to share their toys. The women would offer advice and support, sharing their own experiences with motherhood. Even the preacher, though he never openly acknowledged Wind, seemed to soften his stance towards Clara. He no longer preached against her from the pulpit, and he even offered a small, almost imperceptible nod when he passed her on the street. Clara's blacksmith shop became a gathering place for the community. People would come to have their tools repaired, to share stories, to seek advice, to simply be in the presence of Clara and Wind. The cowboy remained a silent presence, his watchful gaze ensuring that everyone was welcome and safe. He was the heart of the community, the silent protector, the unwavering friend. As Wind grew, he inherited his mother's strength and independence and his father's quiet compassion. He was a happy, well-adjusted child, loved by all who knew him. Clara taught him about blacksmithing, about the importance of hard work, about the value of honesty and integrity. She taught him to respect others, to stand up for what he believed in, and to never be afraid to be himself. The cowboy taught him about the land, about the animals, about the importance of respecting nature. He taught him to ride a horse, to shoot a rifle, and to survive in the wilderness. Together, Clara and the cowboy raised Wind to be a good man, a strong man, a compassionate man. They showed him that it was possible to overcome adversity, to find love and happiness, and to build a life of purpose and meaning. And as Wind grew older, he began to understand the sacrifices that his mother and the cowboy had made for him. He knew that he was lucky to have them in his life, that they had given him everything he needed to succeed. He knew that he was Wind, the son of Clara Gray, the blacksmith of redemption, and the silent cowboy who had saved her life. He was Wind, and he was free. Years passed, and Wind grew into a young man, tall and strong like his mother, with the quiet intensity of the cowboy. He was skilled at the forge, able to shape metal with the same ease and grace as Clara. He was also a skilled horseman, able to ride and hunt with the best of them, thanks to the cowboy's patient tutelage. The cowboy, though he never spoke of his past, remained a constant presence in their lives. He was a part of the family, a silent guardian, a loving father figure to Wind. One day, a stranger rode into Redemption, a man dressed in fine clothes and riding a fancy horse. He inquired about Clara Gray, the blacksmith, and asked to see her. Clara, wary of strangers, approached him cautiously. The man introduced himself as a lawyer, representing a wealthy businessman from the East. He explained that the businessman was searching for a skilled blacksmith to oversee the construction of a new factory. He had heard of Clara's reputation and had come to offer her the job. The job offered a large salary, a comfortable house, and the opportunity to showcase her skills on a grand scale. It was a chance for Clara to escape the small town of Redemption and to provide a better life for Wind. Clara was tempted. She had always dreamed of expanding her blacksmithing skills, of creating something truly extraordinary. But she hesitated. She had built a life in Redemption, a life filled with love, friendship, and purpose. She didn't want to leave. She looked at Wind, who stood beside her, his eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. She looked at the cowboy, who stood silently in the background, his expression unreadable. She asked the lawyer for time to consider the offer. He agreed, giving her a week to make her decision. Clara spent the next few days wrestling with her decision. She sought advice from the townspeople, from her friends, from the women who had supported her through thick and thin. They all told her to follow her heart, to do what she believed was best for herself and for Wind. But Clara still couldn't make up her mind. Finally, she turned to the cowboy. She asked him what he thought she should do. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding. He didn't say a word, but he reached out and took her hand. His touch was warm, reassuring, and filled with love. Clara knew then that she had her answer. She didn't need to leave Redemption to find happiness or success. She had everything she needed right there, in the love of her son and the unwavering support of the silent cowboy. She told the lawyer that she was declining the offer. He was disappointed, but he respected her decision. He thanked her for her time and rode away. Clara turned to Wind and the cowboy, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. She knew that she had made the right choice. She was home, and she was happy. Clara lived a long and fulfilling life in Redemption. She continued to work at the forge, her skills growing sharper with each passing year. She became a legend in her own time, a symbol of strength, resilience, and independence. Wind, following in his mother's footsteps, became a skilled blacksmith in his own right. He inherited Clara's passion for the craft and the cowboy's quiet strength and compassion. He took over the forge when Clara grew old, ensuring that her legacy would live on. The cowboy, though he never spoke of his past, remained by Clara's side until the very end. He was her silent protector, her loving companion, her unwavering friend. He passed away peacefully in his sleep, his hand clasped in Clara's. Clara lived for many years after the cowboy's death, surrounded by her family, her friends, and the townspeople who had come to love and respect her. She died peacefully in her sleep, her heart filled with love and gratitude. But Clara's legacy lived on long after she was gone. Her courage and independence inspired generations of women in Redemption. They saw in her a role model, a woman who had defied expectations, overcome adversity, and built a life on her own terms. Young girls dreamed of becoming blacksmiths, of shaping metal with the same skill and grace as Clara. They learned to stand up for themselves, to speak their minds, and to never be afraid to be different. Women started their own businesses, pursued their own dreams, and refused to be defined by the expectations of others. They formed a women's society, a group dedicated to supporting each other, to advocating for their rights, and to celebrating their achievements. The town of Redemption changed. It became a more tolerant, more accepting, and more progressive place. The preacher's rigid rules and judgments were replaced by a spirit of compassion and understanding. The memory of Clara Gray, the blacksmith of Redemption, became a symbol of hope and inspiration for all who dared to dream of a better world. She showed them that it was possible to overcome adversity, to find love and happiness, and to build a life of purpose and meaning. And so, the story of Clara Gray, the woman who was publicly shamed but refused to be broken, became a legend, a testament to the power of the human spirit and a beacon of hope for future generations. She left behind a legacy of courage, independence, and unwavering strength that would forever shape the destiny of redemption. The wind, indeed, carried her spirit far and wide. And what of the silent cowboy? He never spoke of his past, never revealed his name, never explained why he had come to redemption. He remained a mystery, a silent enigma, a symbol of something larger than himself. Some said he was an angel, sent to protect Clara from harm. Others said he was a wanderer, a man searching for redemption of his own. Still others said he was simply a good man, a man who had seen injustice and had felt compelled to act. Whatever his reasons, his silence spoke volumes. It spoke of understanding, of acceptance, of unwavering support. It was a silence that transcended words, a silence that conveyed a depth of emotion that words could never capture. In a world filled with noise and judgment, his silence was a sanctuary, a refuge, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply listen, understand, and accept. He taught the townspeople of redemption the value of silence, the importance of looking beyond appearances, and the power of unspoken love. He showed them that it was possible to communicate without words, to connect with others on a deeper level, and to find meaning in the quiet moments of life. His silence was a challenge to the preacher's bombastic pronouncements, a reminder that true faith is not about words, but about actions. It was a testament to the power of compassion, the power of empathy, and the power of unwavering support. He was the silent cowboy, the man who had saved Clara Gray's life, the man who had helped her rebuild her future, the man who had taught her the meaning of true love. He was a legend in his own time, a symbol of hope, a beacon of light in a world filled with darkness. And though he never spoke, his silence echoed through the generations, reminding everyone that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply be there to offer our support, to show our love, and to let our actions speak louder than words. The story of Clara Gray and the silent cowboy became a timeless tale, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, even in the darkest of times, there's always hope, there's always love, and there is always the possibility of redemption. The wind carried their story, whispering it across the plains, reminding everyone that silence, too, can be a powerful voice. It was the sound of acceptance, the echo of understanding, and the promise of a better tomorrow. It was the enduring power of silence. And as the sun set over redemption, casting a golden glow upon the town, the memory of Clara Gray and the silent cowboy lingered in the air, a reminder that their love, their courage, and their unwavering spirit would forever shape the destiny of redemption. The end.